Hello and welcome to a new Persevere and Motivate video. I'm going to do things a little differently. What you're seeing in the background now is actually more of a time lapse. So I've pre-recorded this and I'm just going to talk over it. Main reason being is because I don't really want to bore you with the UI design that is to come. This actually took me about just over an hour to do, so I'm just going to talk about what's actually happening in the background as I voice record and also record what appears to be my face. So let's discuss what's happening right now. So as you can see, I've actually done quite a bit in advance. So a lot of what you're seeing here is based on the contract information. You're seeing that I'm changing some things slightly. The whole freelance hours just didn't fit in my mind at the time, as you can see, so I'll get rid of that, primarily because the idea of having just freelancers having the option to have fixed hours or not seems a bit weird. You could have things like flexible contract time for or flexible hours, should I say, in permanent and even temporary contracts. So it just didn't really make much sense to have only freelancers to do that. Now I'm also filling out the statutory rights section here. Obviously you've got your probation period and again your interval. That's based on whether or not it's, you know, weekly or monthly or yearly. And there's obviously going to be holidays as well, which I will be doing now. Holidays granted. And of course, as explained in one of my earlier videos, you've also got holiday that can be calculated on a pro rata basis for a temporary contract. For a freelance contract, most of these statutory rights will not be applicable, unless of course the freelancer is working fixed hours. And you will find that, I'll just put in here information only in the pay section there, because that is what it is pretty much. It is just information only. Yeah, as you can see, I'm now actually typing in what the holidays granted is actually all about. So if fixed hours are selected, when I eventually actually start typing, if fixed hours are selected, holiday is calculated pro rata. If it is not fixed hours and your contract type is freelance, holidays are not calculated. So there's the explanation as to the reason why that is. And of course, the holiday is calculated based on the value that you put into that numeric up down, or well, that's what it's called anyway. The reason why the pay section is information only is because there's not going to be payroll software within Persevere and Motivate, at least for the time being. Payroll software is very specific. It's very tight when it comes to financial regulations and stuff like that, so it's probably going to be something I develop as part of more of a team of people rather than on my own, because obviously I don't know the regulations behind the financial side of payroll, and I don't pretend to know. So here what you're seeing is training materials. There is going to be an upload manager, so that will be a separate form where you'll be able to upload files As you can see here, I'm just adding the file upload class, which will include things like the ID, the original file path, the server path, and what will eventually become the short name, which I'll add a little later. And I'm also adding the attachment, which will be based on a specific scope. So you'll have the file upload ID there, the scope, and then just add the constructor there like that. So as I was saying before I got distracted easily, the form that is to be applicable for uploading files, that will just be a separate form as part of the application, and you'll be able to select files within that upload form, as you saw there. There's that short name variable. I was thinking of adding something else just as a sort of a future-proof thing for other modules later, but it just didn't seem right at the time. So what you're seeing here is also a DB version. I mean, there's really no point in doing it right now, but I thought, you know what, eventually I'm going to be doing it anyway, before the application is even released. The DB version is primarily designed around changes to the database, so that will be marked against different fields to determine whether or not those fields are applicable in certain areas, certain versions of the software. So it's not really database version, it's actually software version. We're also moving on to interview questions. So obviously you need to present interviews, questions to pose to interviewees. I'm just figuring out what the hell to do. Just renaming a few files over there, just to keep it a little convenient. I did make a mistake when designing this form. I accidentally marked the fore color transparent instead of the back color. I do eventually figure that out. Just changing a few things around. And what you're seeing there, when you're seeing type each specification on each line to apply a score to the specification, prefix the item with X, where X is the score, or colon X colon. There's going to be some background stuff to that, so we'll do that. We'll actually talk about that. I would like to know your thoughts about this format, by the way, just in case for whatever reason you prefer the old format, or perhaps this format's good. Just let me know your thoughts in the comment section below this video. That would be good. Thank you very much. Obviously there you can see that I'm figuring things out. I think eventually I do change this to a list box in the end. So you'll be able to add a question. Now that I think about it, a delete button might be useful there, and even an edit button, funnily enough. So now I'm designing the interview question form, and that'll be following the PM underscore interview question database object. And eventually I do reference that. It's going to be a maximum score of 10, per question, and each score is basically a reference to how much score each question's answer is worth. At least as someone who's recruiting. Here I am replacing the question results. You'll be able to print the questions form. So initially that will actually bring up a preview from which you can then print. We're not actually going to be using the preview dialog, by the way. Here I am designing the scorecard tab. This is quite simple. It's primarily just for information purposes. There obviously are going to be, values to modify, just not much. It's primarily an information purposes, and here I'm adding a label to basically describe what the scorecard is about. This section determines the minimum and maximum scores you think, based on required skills and experience, would be suitable for finding and selecting candidates. And remember that this is a guideline, but you must adhere to all relevant recruitment laws. So it is literally just a guideline. It's up to you if you want to use the score system, but it will be helpful when selecting candidates, both at the CV stage, when you're actually selecting candidates to interview, and also selecting them for recruitment as well. You'll see I'm actually making a mistake here. When I actually eventually reference the scorecard class, which will be soon, I will actually find that I'm making a mistake, and here we are. It's actually based on a minimum score for applications and a minimum score for interviews, and that's primarily designed around, as I explained in a previous video, around the score based on the values from previous sections, like say in the general section you've got your requirements, for example, and when you get applications from candidates, the system will automatically add together all of the scores, and then you can select which candidates you'd like to see. Obviously, again, it's a guideline. It's still recommended to actually take a look at, obviously, the cover letter and the CV of your candidates, and not just go by what this system's saying. But if you've got a huge number of applications coming through, so many of them, then you can just take a look at the ones that the system considers to be decent enough, having had picked up a lot of the certain keywords based on what you put into your requirements. Then you'll be able to go from there. And here we have the summary tab. You can mark the application live. That's going to be improved later, and of course validation errors as well, just to make sure that everything is correct in what you've edited and added to the role. And just for your information, inside of the launcher where you had the profile, the training materials would all appear in that in the user's profile when they log in to Persevere and Motivate. Here we're adding the contents for the variable payments tab. That will of course include variable payments for specific types of tasks. And when I was thinking about it, I then decided actually it's probably best that there's a minimum and maximum salary, and I also changed the data types to decimal. So, you know, this is the reason why it is always best to design things first before adding things to the database, because otherwise you have to keep going back and forth between this and the database to keep changing data types, etc. Here I am again adding another database object, which would be the variable payment. We'll have a description or the type of the amount, what am I talking about? The type of the task that might be given to a freelancer, and then you might have a minimum and maximum payout. I do eventually get rid of that paid there, that boolean value, because it just didn't seem right. And again, I'm putting there some information about the fact that it's for freelancers primarily. The section is useful if the tasks given to a freelancer requires a varied amount of skill, and each task is different or substantially different. The following payment values help you determine payouts for certain types of tasks. So that's the information for that particular section. And again, this is all just design. I'm not adding any code yet per se. Obviously I'm adding the structure for the database for when I eventually do this section, but we're not actually properly putting it all together yet. That'll be in another video. So here I'm adding the form for creating a new payment value, and of course this will reflect the database object that we just created. I'm curious why I'm pausing there. Doesn't seem right, does it? Now I opt to make this multi-line, thinking that perhaps it could be a fairly lengthy description, but then I thought actually this is actually going to be part of when you actually create tasks inside of the project module, which will eventually be available. This will actually be part of that, so you'll be able to select the new payment value or each payment value depending on the type of task it is. So they will be considered types, which is why you have type or description now. And then each task is considered the service. Now that is the end of the video, so I'm going to finish there for the time being. So obviously what you saw there was primarily the complete UI work for the Persevere and Motivate HR module for the role section there. So thank you very much for watching. In the next video we'll actually start discussing and actually going into the code, and we'll go back to normal. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.